What's up, Omar?
Howdy, how's it going?
What's going on? It's Monday.
Yeah,
Is there you know how they have like Taco Tuesdays or like Thirsty Thursdays? Like is there a saying for Mondays? Marshall Mondays.
hey, I like that. Marshall Mondays. You had me thinking. That's a good one.
Marshall Mondays. So what's going on in your world? We have a very exciting guest coming on, right?
We do. I'm excited. I know, like, you know, obviously, being part of the Nimpo community, for some time now, obviously, and especially in the US, you know, I'm pretty sure if you've trained in Nimpo in the US, you've heard of this individual.
Mhm.
So I'm excited. I've watched, some of his podcasts in the past. I've seen you speak with him. I've never personally met him, so I'm excited to have him on our show live.
Yeah, same. I've spoken to him many times. I've even went to his school and uh, stayed at his house because of a unfortunate situation with my car that broke down.
Oh,
So
wow.
I had to stay at his house. Um, but before we bring him on, I always ask, what's new in the world of shadow combatives? Anything new going on at your school, or um, how's training been going the last couple weeks?
Yeah, it's been going really well. We've One of the reasons I had rebranded in the past to Shadow Combatives and Self Defense, a more modern name was, to help, obviously, like, advertise, ourselves as more of like a self defense school, and bringing that crowd. And I think we're finally starting to see that really kicking in now. Getting a lot of like females actually sending emails and enrolling. I mean, it's 100% of the prospects I've had in the past 2 months have all been female. Already had a few of them sign up,
Interesting.
and yeah, it's been great. I think that I told you about that festival that we had a couple blocks down the street from my dojo, and we set up a tent there and a table. That was one of the best decisions I've ever made for the dojo. So that
Why
certainly
do you
helped a lot.
think? So why do you think that is? Why do you think it's a lot of females?
Honestly, like when you just say self defense, I think that that's one thing that's catchy, right? I mean, obviously, like
Right.
Krav Maga, right? You say Krav Maga, a lot of people know that just because it's almost like a household name.
Right.
But self defense as well. I mean, that's just you know, it kind of speaks for itself. I mean, most schools in Northern Virginia, there's a ton of them. They Well, they'll be like taekwondo and karate and BJJ, and then they'll claim, that's a self-defense school. So I think that something that also helps is, we've got 5-star ratings on Google. I think close to like 20 ratings or so. Um, that certainly helps. A lot of people find us, a lot of my leads are organic from Google. So that also helps. But another thing is we actually, teach people about local laws with self-defense and scenario-based, situations. It's not just, stand there and do, punching and kicking in the air, katas and stuff and call it self-defense. So,
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
yeah, so that's been helping.
Cool. Well, you ready to bring our guest on?
Let's do it.
All right. Without further ado, Mr. Allie Alberigo, how are you?
How are you guys? Good to be here.
Great.
Thank you for coming on tonight. I know how busy
Yeah.
you are, so
And
we
I'm not
greatly
used to
appreciate.
doing podcasts at night. Like this is the first time I've done one in a long time. Usually it's in the day or early morning or whatever.
Right. We try to. We're trying the nighttime stuff because we figured it'd be the best time for everyone to watch it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I wouldn't be against doing it during the day. I would try it during the day and see if that's better. Maybe people will watch it more because they don't want to be working.
Yeah. I used to do my own, I did called Lunchtime Chat. It was a podcast that I do on positive stuff and things like that. And I did that at like 12 o'clock noon my time. And it was always pretty well attended. People could take off a lunch and listen to the podcast. But the nighttime ones I've never done, but the daytime ones are hit or miss. It depends on the day, who's available, and so on.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on.
It's my pleasure, man. It definitely is. I love to be on anything, especially Nimpo, ninjutsu, jujitsu related. Makes me happy to spread the word.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
that's one thing I definitely want to touch on is like, I don't think I don't think people realize, especially like my student body. I don't know about Omar's student body, but my student body, I don't think they realize how rare um, Nimpo and Ninjutsu schools are in general, and
Yeah.
Japanese Jiu-Jitsu,
Yeah.
especially at the level we do it at, where we have a brick and mortar business.
Mm-hmm.
Most guys just teach out of their house,
Right.
out of their basement or garage or
Right.
whatever, So for us to do it the way we're doing it and do it successfully, we're below 1%.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's interesting though you say that, because like even in my area, there are a bunch of ninjutsu schools, but they're all people who broke off from me. They were once my students, and of course they wanted to be the man, so they jumped out and did their own thing. Of course, I get no credit for it. They don't really mention me. They pretend like I didn't exist. However, everyone kind of knows that they were my people, my students, and they just had to do their own thing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of martial arts instructors find out that when they like break off from their sensei or whatever and try to do their own thing, it's not all rainbows and gumdrops.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You really have to have a business mindset to do this successfully, and so you can pay the bills and things like that. It doesn't matter how good of a martial artist you are. If you don't have a business mindset, you're most likely going to fail
Yeah.
within the first year.
Right. Yeah, I had a school that I opened in my second location, probably in the mid 90s. And I shouldn't have done it. I wanted it more for the student than they wanted it for themselves. It was a really good black belt. I'm like, this will be perfect for you. Let's expand. Let's, do that. And he was not into it. And then eventually I said, I can't do this anymore. You're not listening. You're not following my lead. So I ended up breaking off, and he continued on right in that same location. He's still open now for almost 27 years it's been. And
Wow.
One time he came up to me, he saw me and he said, we hadn't talked for months and years, and he came up to me and he said, can I have a talk with you? And I'm like, well, what's going to happen now? Right. Like, I want to see it. But he said, I just wanted to say thank you. I didn't realize back then, what you wanted and what you were trying to accomplish and how you were trying to teach me and all the things that I needed to know and do and act and so on. And he gave me a lot of credit. He made me feel real good, because it hurts as a teacher. You guys know this, you raise your students up, and you care for them like they were family members, and then all of a sudden they disappear, and I tell this to parents all the time. You have a kid 3-4 years old, they're with you till they're like 7 or 8, and all of a sudden they decide to quit, and that's it. Communication ended. It's almost like you were the uncle that got to see them 3 days a week, every single week for the last 7 years. Then all of a sudden the parents say, well, we're moving to Iceland and you'll never see us again. And you just have to say your goodbyes and then take the loss. And people don't realize, as martial art teachers, how painful that is, because we get I know I do. I get very attached to the people that I like and train.
It's funny. Me and Omar just had this conversation last week. And I told him, because he has a different relation. He has a smaller school than I do, but he has a different relationship with his students. He's more closer to them, even on a personal level than I am with mine. And the reason for that, it's not because I think I'm high and mighty.
Right.
It's not because, I think I'm better than them, or whatever reason. The reason why I keep a wall up is because of what you just said.
Yeah.
Is because if I get too attached, it hurts a lot when they leave, because the first thing I think about is, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail them? And it's very sad, and it hurts so much that I put up a wall. And people think like, I don't want to get close to them, or I just think about the money and things like that. That's not what it is. it's more or less like, I know, I told Omar all the time, every student will leave one day.
Yeah.
Every student.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I try not to allow myself to get too attached to
Yeah.
them. Of course, I have my few that I do, right?
Yeah.
But
You always will.
yeah, it's just I can't allow myself to get attached to everyone because
Right.
I'll just be heartbroken all the time.
Yeah, and you know, for Omar too, I remember like I once did a seminar, a business seminar at the company was called APS at the time, and they morphed to many different companies, and then they eventually sold the business. But I was their head and lead consultant, so I did a seminar for all their clients, and I talked about a martial arts school, the analogy of a school as if it were like when you first open, you have a tiny school. Omar's school is like a little tiny town. Everyone knows each other. They know their business. They know who's dating who. We know everything about our students. You know, they know about us, and it's very personal. You know, it's like we're friends. We're part of a family. We used to go out to dinner together, the movies every weekend. Mm-hmm. And then as you start to grow, of course, you know, you become from a little town, you become like a little city, right? And then, you know, you get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's much more difficult to communicate. Even just to communicate when you're closed and when you're open. Like today we were closed and off for the holiday. I still got like 11 text messages. Are you closed today? I'm like, okay, listen, it's on the website. It's on Facebook. I sent it out. It's on our app. I sent out a text message Saturday and Sunday, like, and you still didn't get it. And people like, oh no, I didn't even read those. I don't pay attention.
Like, I hope my students are watching this.
Yeah.
Now you hear from someone else too.
I'm like, well, you didn't pay attention. Well, then it's good that you took a ride and no one was there, because maybe you'll learn your lesson next time, and you'll kind of read the stuff that I send to you and spend countless hours preparing. But yeah, and as you expand, you grow. I mean, at one point, I had, at my peak, I had 6 schools in Long Island. I had 5 out of the country. On my schools in Long Island, I had 1,200 students. So it was like all the schools combined. And, you know, it was amazing. And I was close, but I was never going to ever be able to be as close. So each instructor that ran those locations, they were the ones that were closer with the students. And that sometimes presents a problem, because then they become so close with them, then they decide they're going to go off on their own and leave, you know, and say, okay, goodbye, you know, and I'm going to take all the students with me, you know, and that becomes a problem. So it's hard. It's something that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I would agree.
I thought it was funny when you brought that up. Sorry, Louis?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I thought it was funny when you brought that up about, you know, like students coming in and leaving. I actually posted something on my Facebook page, my dojo's Facebook page recently about that. Basically it's just, you know, exactly what Louis said. You know, it's, you know, people come and go, and, you know, don't always try to take it personally. It could be for a lot of different reasons. Just be thankful for, you know, the opportunity to have work with each other. And, you know, like right now, between like adults and kids, I have maybe like 27 students. So small school. You know, it's pretty much split half and half, I'd say. Yeah. But you know, some of like my most of my students usually stick around for at least a couple of years. Right. You know, my longest was about, I think, 7 to 8 years. And, you know, he had started his own dojo, and, you know, a couple of years ago, and, you know, he's just kind of been distracted. So, you know, that's along the lines of what I was talking to Louis about recently. But, you know, I mean, it's happened before, and, you know, I get it. It makes sense. I'm glad you talked about it, you know, that comparison about, you know, small village, you know, and big village, big town, big city. I think
then all of a sudden you're a state, and then you're like, you know, a country, right? Because that depends on how large you are and where you're located and how many locations you have. But I'll give you some advice. As you do this more and more, like myself, I've been doing martial arts. This is going to be this coming February, I'll be 60 years old. And I'll be doing martial arts for running my school for 34 years, but martial arts for like 56 years, long time. Wow. And, you know, just alone, I love when people will, you know, try to discredit me in some way. And that happens all the time in our industry. But I could just say, look, I've been in the martial art business. I've run a school for 33 years. Like, how many people could say that they've done that for over 3 decades? There are a lot of schools out there that do, but it's not easy and it takes a lot of work. And there are hard times. And I think the biggest majority of the pain that you feel as a martial art teacher is from situations where you have, like, for example, I went to one of my students' weddings last night. 2 of my students got married, and there was like 10 of my students there because they're all friends, and we all sat at the same table. And this girl started with me when she was 7. So now her and her husband, she's probably 30 something years old. And it's just amazing. And her sister was a black belt, to see them grow up. And at the table, I had one of my students who actually just texted me now because he's watching the podcast. He's been training with me for like 25 years, long time. But the advice I give to you is, as these things happen, you just can't take it to heart, because you will. Like you said, Sensei Lewis, you said, like, I wonder what I did, what I could have done better, what I did wrong. Like, and most of the time it's not you. Like, I mean, unless, there are a lot of teachers out there that are probably not the best and they don't do the right thing. And right. Yeah, they are all about the money and they could care less about their students. And I'm absolutely the opposite of that. Like, I get mad when people call my school a business, even though it is a business and I run it like a business, but it's not a business to me. It's a school. It's a dojo. It's like a way of life. It's me transmitting knowledge that I've stored up for the last 50 some odd years and sharing it with my students freely. If I was a Tony Robbins or one of those speakers, I'd be charging tens of thousands of dollars to share little pieces of that information, right? Yeah. And we do it for a small amount of tuition every single month. And it's a shame, because even with the younger generation now, the kids and the parents of the kids, they don't quite realize how much we do, like how important we are in their lives. And this girl who got married, she mentioned her sister did the talk for her, the black belt sister. She did a little speech, and she's talking about when they started in the martial arts and when they trained in the martial arts and when they were on the demo team and went to tournaments. Like, my wife turned to me and said, this is a big part of their lives. It impacted them in an incredible way. And that's why we do what we do. Some of those people will just disappear. You'll never see them again. And I have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students that's happened to. But when I do eventually, some of them eventually come back, not many, but when they do, they tell you of all the things that happened in the dojo that changed their lives for the better. So just remember that, like, even when people quit, unless it's on bad terms and then people just go rogue and start being nasty for no reason. We could talk about things like that too. But yeah, it's majority of the people have had good experiences, and they'll always take that with them forever.
Yeah, I would agree. So I guess give a little brief history on for people that don't know you and who are watching this. Yeah. On your martial arts background, history. Okay. I know you've been to Japan so many times.
Yeah.
Well,
so give us a little rundown.
Before you turn it over, Lewis, I want to say something, because I'm pretty sure Ali Shihan's not going to say this himself. But for anyone else watching this, I've always considered him as one of the pioneers of like American Ninpo or Ninjutsu, right? He was not the first, but I would say he's probably the most successful as far as consistency and growing the school. He's based out in Long Island. Obviously, they say like, Stephen Hayes brought it over, and then there was like Ronald Duncan. I don't even know what his lineage really was.
I know him personally, or knew of him. So if you have any questions for me, ask me. I know the family really well.
Oh wow, yeah, I follow their Facebook page. Obviously, he had passed, rest in peace. But I was always fascinated by him, but I never really understood, I guess, like as far as their lineage. So certainly something else to talk about another time. Yeah. But so for anyone else watching it, Ali Shihan has been in the game for a very, very long time, and we're not a very popular style as far as Ninpo and Ninpo US, and love to hear his background. So
yeah, I'll quickly run through it real quick. Like, it's interesting. At my leadership team, I went through my lineage. I took the kids and I wrote it down on paper. And as I was recalling it, I'd make these boxes and write the dates approximately. Then we just recently did National Martial Art Appreciation Month. This is the kind of thing that we started out here, and it's now kind of worldwide, where the month of September is, the whole month is, bringing in your friends and sharing your history with them. So I shared my lineage. So when I was younger, I started off, I was a baby. My dad and mom put me in the martial arts. My dad was a Nassau County police officer. For some reason, he wanted me to be involved. My dad wasn't tall. My mom was short. So I guess I'd be a small kid. And they put me in a system called Jerome Mackey, which was probably the first most successful franchise in the martial arts back then. They had TV commercials and the whole nine. And I trained with them for many years. I was able to attain a black belt, a junior black belt at a very young age. I started at 3.5. I got up to maybe 10, 1972, 73. And I got a black belt with them, which was unheard of. I just don't think they knew what to do with me. I kept progressing and staying with it. So they're like, let's give this kid a black belt, let him wear it. It was a junior black belt, that kind of thing. And then eventually the school closed. And my cousin, fortunately, was a martial artist, and he would live in Rockaway, which is the city, drive out and spend the weekends with my family. And he would teach me martial arts. He trained in Muay Kwan Tang Soo Do. He had a black belt in Aikido. And he taught me mostly Aikido, and he eventually awarded me a black belt in Aikido. And I would train weekends, 3-4 days every weekend when he'd come out. And he was the great uncle, right? He was a musician, a singer in a band, which I was a musician too. And he would give me nunchucks and then take me to concerts, or give me throwing stars and take me to see a rock band. So it was the best of both worlds. And then I joined, and I believe the next system I took was a Shotokan karate, which I took, and I got to EQ brown belt, right before black. And that school closed down. And then I found another school, which was probably one of the most impactful in my entire life. And the teacher was Tuhan Chris Sayak of the Sayak fighting system. They're one of the best and most dangerous knife fighting systems that are out there today. I mean, they were in movies like The Hunted with Benicio del Toro, and they did a whole bunch of other choreography. Wow. And I was blessed to train under him. And one day I come in and he's dangling the keys for the dojo like this in front of me. And he tosses them in the air, and I snap them out of the air. And he says, the school's yours. You run it, and keep me posted. I'll come down periodically and see how you're doing. And I was 15 at the time. I was then automatically a business owner, paying the bills, doing marketing. The marketing, I remember I was in a class in high school called Print Shop, where we would learn how to do printing, right? And it was one of our electives, right? So I made a business card on this, you put the letters in the thing and it's in the tray, and you roll the ink down. And I made business cards, Bayshore Martial Arts Academy. And all my friends trained with me, and we did that for a long time. And then I ended up deciding to close the school down and move on, and wanted to just train. I just wanted to train in ninjutsu. That was my dream. And I always would watch a ninjutsu teacher in the tournaments. But I'll before I get into that, Tuhan Sayak then was back on Long Island, and he lived with me for a year. He was like my personal Mr. Miyagi. He lived in my house. It was amazing. My mom allowed it. It was the most crazy and insane training. People don't believe me. They think they're all stories, so you could believe it or not. But he'd wake me up at 2 a.m. He'd send me out in the backyard. He'd be shooting bow and arrows at me. He would, no joke. This sounds like a movie, but it really would happen. Wow. I could show you a scar on my leg where the arrow shot into my knee.
Oh, wow.
He'd make me climb up trees and then climb off the limbs, and the branches would snap, and he'd say, roll, and I'd hit the ground and I'd roll. And we'd be doing knife tapping, parrying drills till wee hours of the morning. And the weirdest thing was my mom sometimes would sit at the kitchen table while he's shooting arrows at me, needle pointing. She'd be my mom was wild. I couldn't believe that she would allow that to go on, right? Because I would never, with my child, let that happen. But I'm so thankful to God that she allowed that, because the training and my life was different. And then he ended up leaving and moving and going out of state. And then I was always wanting to train with this one ninjutsu guy. And this is, Omar, where it's going to connect to what you said before. His name was Xian Felix Vasquez. He's an American ninjutsu practitioner. So I'd see him at tournaments, and he was hardcore old school. And I would always try to talk to him. And when I would try to directly speak to him, he would never talk to me directly. He would talk to his head student. His name was Robert Hernandez, who ended up becoming my instructor for a while, and then my training brother. And then he would tell Hernandez, Hernandez would tell me. And then that's how we had conversations for a while until I found a school right in my area that said ninjutsu. And I'm like, oh my God, this has to be my calling. It's got to be Xian Vasquez, which I had no idea why. But I pulled in, turned out to be Sensei Robert Hernandez opened up a school in my area, and I started training there. Unfortunately, after like 8 months, he closed it down because he couldn't travel back and forth. But what he said to me was, if you want to continue, you just drive to Ridgewood, Queens, which was an hour into the city every day. And I drive an hour in and an hour back. And I did that for 15 years, training with Xian Felix Vasquez, became one of his top ranks. I was a 4th Dan Renshi at the time. I was on his international demo team, traveled the world with him, and it was Robert Hernandez, myself, and him, and a few other students. And it was just amazing. And he was Ronald Duncan's direct student.
Wow.
So the Duncan line was Professor Duncan taught Xian Vasquez, amongst other people. Xian Vasquez taught me. So I was able to gain access and become really good friends with Professor Ronald Duncan, who was like the most magical person you ever met. There's a great video of him. I don't know if you've ever seen it, where he's catching arrows on a black and white. And I mean, not like, a light pole shoot, like full pole light, and boom. And he's catching them and blocking them and so on. He was just incredible. I've had him at my school many times. I'd go out to breakfast with him on Wednesdays, and it was magical. And then I, through Xian Vasquez, went to a seminar with Stephen Hayes. We became friends. And then eventually I was able to get introduced to Tanimura Sensei, and then travel to Japan. But the first time I met Tanimura Sensei, I asked him if I could train with him. And he didn't speak very good English at all. He signed the photo and handed it to me. And I said, okay, I guess I thought that was his answer, but he just didn't understand English. So the next time I saw him and had the privilege of training with him, I was able to go through Robert Hansen, who was a very famous Long Island martial artist. He brought me to Japan with a group of people. And that was 1992. And I started training with Tanimura Sensei from there. And I trained with him from 92 to 2005. I was in Japan 17 times, traveled all over the world. Anywhere Tanimura Sensei was, I was there. England, Italy, Philadelphia, Minnesota, Milwaukee, all those places I would go. So I could be around him. And I laugh because my students sometimes can't travel to a tournament that's like one town over because it's too far. And I'm like, I used to travel to Japan to be with the teacher. Like, are you kidding me? But we live in a different era. So that's some of my history. And that's how I got to where I am. And I started my school in 1991.
Wow.
Yeah.
Also, just for anyone else, I'm not name dropping, but one of Lewis and my former teachers is actually a former student of Allie Shihan as well. So, everyone is always connected in some way in the U.S.
Yeah, and in his defense, it was like a short time. He was assigned to me through Tanimura Sensei so I could get him up to speed on his belt level so that he can continue being a direct student. So when I saw a lineage chart that you had made, Sensei Lewis, that I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Oh my God, I'm on this chart. I'm like, wow, how the hell did I get there? Which is thank you for doing that. Because some people don't show appreciation for what got them started or where they were. But I'm honored with that as well. But that's cool.
Yeah. Awesome. That's such a rich history. And you could, knock on wood, you can pass away tomorrow and live an amazing life. You have lived an amazing life.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and that's only one side of my life. Like I was also a performing rock musician in a 1980s hair metal band that toured around the country with all those 80s rockers too. So between martial arts, so you could see all my guitars behind me in the videos, right?
I thought those were guitars. I wasn't sure.
They're cool. So I did that as well. But I had 3 loves, right? 3 loves. Martial arts, music, and girls. That was it. So those are my 3 things that I cared about when I was younger, and I always pursued that all. Now I'm lucky to have a great wife and a good, beautiful daughter, and she just turned 25. I know you've met her before. 25 years old now. It's incredible. It's just I do have if I died tomorrow, I hope that I would have made a difference and people would remember me for that.
Yeah, you definitely made a difference in a lot of people's lives. Having thousands of students, taking them to Japan and with you to different countries, and
Yeah.
they'll never forget stuff like that. And you hit the nail on the head. It's funny how it's a different world now. I used to, you can ask Omar, when I used to train with Omar, I used to drive, over an hour
Yeah.
to go to my classes,
Yeah.
3 times a week, 4 times a week, and people will, do an intro class in my school and be like, this was like 20-minute drive.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a right fit for me. I'm like, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I had a 20-minute drive.
I know. It's a different world, though. It really is. And like, I wish we could bring back that kind of mindset, but it's hard. Like, I'll give you an example. One of my parents was talking to another parent, and the father travels from a place called Ridge, which is like a good 45 minutes out east, like almost near the Hamptons on Long Island. And she's like, "You come from Ridge?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, and she goes, "Well, I only joined this school because it's right around the corner from my house." Like, there was no credibility to us. It didn't matter what style we did. It didn't matter, anything about how nice the school was. It was just that it was convenient so that she could drop her kid off. However, this guy goes, "You have no idea. The reason why I travel is because Allie he's been doing this for so long, and he's one of the most going over the whole thing, blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "Oh, I didn't even realize that. I had no idea." Like, and that's good. Like, I'm lucky I picked the right school. Like, so it's kind of funny that people don't understand that.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. Omar knows this story. So the one time I came in, so I don't teach all the time like I used to. I come in, I teach maybe 1 day a week, maybe only 1 class a week. Some weeks I don't teach at all, right? So the students don't see me a lot, especially the younger students, the littles.
Yeah.
The adults have more access to me than the kids do. But I come in the one day for a graduation, right? And, oh no, I'm sorry, not a graduation. I came in to just watch classes because I wanted to see, sometimes I'll come in, want to see what the instructors are doing well, what they need improvement on, stuff like that.
Right.
So I'm just in the corner, sitting in my chair, taking notes. And this kid comes over and he's like, "Are you new here?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah,
exactly. I was like, "I just started last week." I was like, "How am I doing?" And he's like, "Well, you're just sitting down." And I'm like, "Yeah, I should probably get up, right?" He's like, "Yeah, you probably should." Even though my picture is on the wall.
Yeah.
Right? No idea.
I have a funny picture story. I also have my picture on my wall, and one of the kids asked me recently, like, "When did that guy die?" And I'm like,
wow.
that guy is me. I'm that guy. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what? Like, I might have been a lot younger in the photo, right? But in his defense, like, it's so hysterical that they don't get it, and how lucky they are. Like, that's one thing I have to tell you. Like, I always was enamored by my teachers. Like, I revered them, right? And I once had I had this parent, man, that he was like the worst. Like, I hate to say that negatively, but his kid was the best. He was the worst. Like, he was a troublemaker. He would always be in the lobby talking crap about the dojo and to other students, trying to turn them. Sometimes if I had a parent come in that was brand new, he'd have negative stuff to say on purpose. Anyway, long story short, he was absolutely the worst. And we had this big argument over reverence. And he said, like, you got such an ego. All you want people to do is revere you. You use the word revere all the time. I said, I don't understand why you don't want your child to have reverence for their teacher. Right. Like, we all know that if you don't really like or believe in someone that much, you're not going to really take their lessons very valuably, right? Like, you're going to be, "Oh, yeah. Like, okay, I get it, but I'm not interested," right? So reference is so important. And anyway, long story short, he would argue with me. And I go, "What if your daughter really respected me and liked me, if I told her not to smoke or not to do drugs or not to drink or whatever?"
Exactly.
She's going to respect me and not do that, hopefully. Right. But if she doesn't care about me because you're always putting me down, and whatever my lessons are in class, the spiritual ones, the mental ones, she's going to discredit them as just gibberish from some guy who doesn't mean anything, right?
Right.
And I believe reverence. Like, I always revered my teachers. Like, I still in my heart love them. In fact, let me show you something. I have this one picture. This picture, I don't know if you see it with the lighting, but his can you guys see that? That's Swami Bawaji, my yoga teacher. He passed away at 124 years old.
Wow.
He was a guy who lived from the 1800s, saw every modern technological advance. There was no running water. He saw every major world war conflict in the whole entire world, right? He would say to me, which is wild, he'd go, hey, Allie, do you know who Hitler was? And I'd go, like Hitler from Germany? He'd go, yeah, he was my driver when I was in India. I go from India to teach in Germany. They'd assign him to be my driver. Like, he knew Mother Teresa and Gandhi and all these people, like, personally. Like, you know, and when I met him, I found an immediate connection. Like, I love this guy. And he would talk to me in Hindu or Hindi, right? Like, and he would talk to me in that language. And I'd always say, Swami, I don't understand, you know, the language. He goes, no, you do. He goes, you just don't remember that you know the language. Like, he thought I was a reincarnate and that I understood it. It was recessed in the back of my mind for generations, right? But he was magical. And this guy at 124 was the wittiest, the most incredibly with it. He could do full leg lifts and, you know, full, you know, cross anza and, you know, cross-legged position. Wow. I mean, he was just in great health. Amazing. Wow. And he did jujitsu, by the way. So one time I was visiting him at his house. I was really sick. I didn't want to go. He's like, you come anyway. And his daughter, he goes, my daughter's going to make you a tea. Right. And I'm like, okay. So he calls his daughter out. By the way, she's 80 years old, his daughter. And she makes me this tea. It tasted like mud and like, you know, mud and urine. Like, and I'm like sucking it down. I drink the whole cup of tea. Within 20 minutes, I'm better. Like, I don't have the sniffles anymore. I don't feel sick anymore. Awesome. I'm fine. And then he says to me, he goes, you know, I did jujitsu. And I'm like, I didn't know that, Swami. So he calls up one of his yoga people. And he goes to them. By the way, they know no martial arts at all. And he says, grab me like around the, you know, so the guy grabs Swami around the neck and Swami throws him in an Ippon Seoinage on the floor. Like, the guy hits the ground. You hear the biggest thud and the guy's laying there. Like, I think he almost killed the guy. Like, because the guy's never taken a, and this is a full blast judo throw. Jeez. And I'm like, Swami, I don't think he's okay. He goes, no, he'll get over it. You know, that kind of thing. Finally, eventually he got up. But this was a guy that was just unbelievable. Like, he was just, I had that love and reverence for him like I did with all my teachers. So reverence is important. If students are listening, they should really understand that, you know, if your teacher is good to you and he's knowledgeable and he shares with you, you should show that respect and that courtesy and really appreciate that time, because, you know, everyone could get things at the touch of their fingers, right? You know, they want to look something up, it's on the internet. You know, they go on the computer, on Google, and search it. But a lot of people don't have to work hard for the lessons that we did when we were younger, that we had to work to get our teachers to trust us so that they would teach us, right? It wasn't, now they just come in and they walk through the door and they're expecting it.
Yeah. That's, you hit the nail on the head. Like, you know, my current teacher, Ron Sensei, now, like, when I see him, even though I haven't been training with him for many years, you know, this is like my second year. Same thing with Omar.
Yeah.
When I see him, I feel like, oh my God, like almost like my dad's walking in the door.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, and I bow and, you know, I just want to make sure that he's comfortable and he's okay. And, you know, anything he needs, you know, are you hungry? Do you need anything?
Yep.
All the time, I'm always asking him something. Do you need anything?
Yeah.
Are you hungry? Do you want me to place your order for food so it's ready by the time training's done? So there, you know, he can eat right away. Things like that. Like, you know, can I grab your stuff? Can I fold your hakama?
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it's crazy to me how, you know, now, you know, this day and age, like, students are not like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you know what, for a while I was on a kick. And by the way, remind me to tell you a funny Gemukan story about that, about the reverence thing. But I was on a kick that I would say things like, you know what, people of this day and age in this modern society, they don't get it, blah, blah, blah. and they don't get it. And why don't they get it? Because they're not taught it, and it's not part of the history now going on, you know, like, so like it's our job as martial artists to teach those ancient ways so that they understand those respects, you know, the way to have protocol in the dojo and the hierarchy and how you treat your sensei, always carrying his bag and always taking care of him and getting him so that he's healthy and happy. And, you know, Swami, my yoga teacher, he never bought food ever. He never purchased it himself. Every day, his students would bring him food so that he could cook it fresh that day. And I said, well, what if they don't come that day? He says, then I won't eat. And that's just a bit, but he never went a day without food. He traveled the entire world, never had a penny that he had to pay, because it was all taken care of always for him, because he was like unbelievable, like legendary. Like, I don't even know what, at that level, he was like, you know, a Swami. He was, you know, godlike in a way. Right. And, but one thing too, that I think that we have to do is to continually teach the lessons of how to act, but we have to, in this modern day and age, explain why it's relevant to them, or else they won't want to do it. They'll think of it like, oh yeah, you just want me to do that because, you know, it's just like you got to learn a move. You just want me to learn that so I could pass the belt test. No, we want you to learn that so you could defend yourself, right? So you could understand the basics of these moves. You need to learn this move, right? And I think that they need to understand the connection as to why it's better to act like that and be like that in the school. And then once they start to really care about the desire to do that, they'll become different people.
That's great advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So one of the things we always talk about on this podcast is self-defense, especially for the modern day, right? Yeah. You know, obviously, do you think you teach Ninpo, Ninjutsu, Jiu-Jitsu?
Right.
Do you think, one, why do you think it gets made fun of? And two, you know, why do you think it's good for self-defense?
Yeah, you see, it's funny that you say it gets made fun of, because, you know, on sites that make fun of things, they make fun of everything, right? You know, so I've never seen like ninjutsu be like a laughing stock, unless you're maybe in the BJJ community and they think that everything's bad except for BJJ, right?
Yep.
You know, I get mad. Like, one of my students just recently wrote a joke, and on the top, he was like writing out a list of things that we had to be remind to tell our students. You know, we're having a Halloween party, we're doing this, and he said McDojo news, and I saw that on the pad and I lit up. Like, I was furious, because I'm like, and I told him, it's like, no, I'm only kidding. I was only joking. It's only for me. And like that, I'm going, well, if that's what you think of the school, and you think of our school as like or those activities, like McDojo activities, then that pisses me off, because we're not at all. I mean, I look at a McDojo, I hate the term, by the way, but I look at it like a fake and a fraud. That's people that are totally not real, and they're faking their way. They seminar'd their way into learning a few moves. And, but I don't like the term at all. But I don't know if ninjutsu gets made fun of. I think that people, once they learn, like the way I speak about ninjutsu is that it's a classical, historical martial art. I always tell people, look, I traveled to Japan 17 times. All of my time, I kind of one time totaled it up. I lived in Japan. If I took all the times that I traveled to Japan, it would have been about 3.5 years of living in Japan.
Gee.
Wow.
Somewhere around there, somewhere, like roughly, right? Because sometimes I'd stay for 2 weeks, sometimes a month. I'd go twice a year, sometimes once a year. So it was pretty awesome. But for me, culturally, the Japanese history and historical Japanese country, right, and the people and the way they live their lives is much different than we live here in the US. Yeah. Right. And so there's an appreciation for everything. There's that hierarchy. There's that respect that we are losing in our country, and that's missing in our country. That's, you know, a dying thing. And you could see, and I don't care what anyone says, left or the right, whoever your political affiliation is or whatever, but I could see the degradation of society, right? Like, I could see it going downhill. Like, I don't think that people have loyalty and honor and integrity. Like, someone used to shake your hand and that was enough, right? Now they'll sign a contract and swear to it, and then 2 weeks later cancel a credit card and go off and rip you off, or talk badly about you in, you know, on whatever, Google or Facebook or whatever, you know, review company.
Right. Yeah, we recently had a client pretty much say, well, they didn't want to abide by the training agreement,
Right.
and pretty much say like, well, who remembers what they signed, years
Right.
ago?
Yeah.
That's like saying like, you signed for a mortgage years
Right.
ago, so it doesn't count. You don't have to pay
Yeah.
your mortgage anymore because
Right.
you're in year 4, so you don't remember that you agreed to pay this much,
Right.
4 years ago. Like that doesn't
Right.
make any sense.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way people are. Whatever's good for them at the time. This is what I wrote an article about it called convenience morality, right? When you're moral and good and you do the right thing, you're a great person when it's convenient. But the minute it becomes difficult is when they start changing their ways. Like, it's funny. I'm at this wedding last night, and all of my people are at one table, but there's an old student. My daughter goes, "Oh, that's so-and-so." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" I didn't even recognize this girl who trained with me, and we had a falling out. And my daughter's like, "Would you say hi to her?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. I have no," because she had written a review telling everybody on Yelp or whatever it was, Google reviews, that all I cared about was money. She got to see right through me about what I am and who I am, and I'm a fake and a fraud and all this other stuff. The review's been up there. This was like 12 years ago, 15 years ago. She wrote it. It's still up there, never taken down. But I said, I have no need to ever say hello to that person, because I went from being invited to be at their sweet 16. They had a candle for me, and I was great. I was everything that they ever wanted until things didn't go their way and they wanted to quit and not pay anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, you can't do that. That's just not the way it goes. And in my agreement on my dojo, the first line in bold 15 or 16 point font in red with an asterisk, it says, this is a yearly agreement. You're signing for a whole year. You can't stop just because your kid doesn't want to go or it's inconvenient or your times change. I go, you're signing and committing for the entire year. You can't stop because you're away for the summer or you're doing this. Like, it clearly spells it out in, right in that first paragraph. Right. So when people say, I didn't know, I'm like, okay, let me send you the agreement that you signed. And it's not like it was buried in line 48 on 2 pages down. It's the first thing that you read before you sign the agreement. Yeah. So people don't have honesty, honor, and loyalty.
Yeah, and it's like,
I actually had a student. She paid me in cash for the whole year up front, which I think was the first time that's happened to me. And I was like, you can just pay monthly. She was like, well, this will motivate me to keep coming throughout the year. Right. So fast forward, I think about 4 or 5 months, she asked for a refund for the remaining amount.
I know.
And she was like, because she had a really bad accident a couple years ago from a bike accident. And, she had, like, God knows how many, like, steel rods throughout her body.
Yeah.
But she was having issues with, like, one of them was causing, like, infection, whatever. So she needed another surgery, and she was back in school. And she was like, she didn't want to potentially interrupt like her classes or semesters. So she was going to push it off for another year to get the procedure done. I said, well, why don't you just do it right now?
Right.
Get it over with. Why are you going to wait a year and exacerbate, the issue?
Yeah.
And, for her, it was more of like, she was just afraid of it.
Right.
And then after that, a couple weeks after, that's when, she's like, I can't come anymore because medical reasons. And can I have a refund? I was like, I'm sorry. I can't do that. I gave you an option. And she never responded. But that was it.
I'm sure you're the bad guy though. Now you're definitely, you went from, and it's funny. I once had a student, no joke, compare me. They said, you're like Tony Robbins and Hitler. And I'm like, I don't get it. I go, before I get annoyed, please explain, and they're like, because Tony Robbins brainwashes people. And so did Hitler. And I'm going like, but one's doing it for the good of humankind. The other one was an evil dictator, crazy person, right? Like, how do you put those two? And I always said, you go from being like, and not to say that we are, but you go from being looked at like as Jesus, as like you're the greatest, right? And then one day you're like Satan, right? Because you didn't promote their kid the day they wanted, or they didn't get the belt, or they didn't get the this, or they want to stop and their kid's bored, and they as parents don't know how to motivate. They don't know how to put their foot down and say, you're not quitting, get in the car. Like when I didn't want to go to the dojo when I was like 5 or 6, I'd say, Ma, I don't want to go today. She, okay, I'll see you down in the car in 5 minutes. You better have your uniform on. That was the conversation. Like, and I knew, like, if I didn't, my mom, she would always threaten to hit me, you know, with the wooden spoon, or she had my dad's police belt, all threats. But she would make my life miserable for the next 2 or 3 weeks, like if I didn't obey her. So like, I didn't want to deal with that. So I listened to what she had to say, but it really didn't take much motivation. Get down and put your uniform on and we'll see you in the car. And then I was happy that I went. Like, I was never disappointed that I went to the dojo. Right. You know, so like when parents let their kids quit, I'm so sad for them, because they're missing out on this magic pill that they could be giving to their kids.
Yeah. Man, you bring up such good points, man. I don't even have to explain, but it's like, you know, I've been taking martial arts since I was 6 years old. Yeah. And I've wanted to quit so many times. You know, it happens to everybody. You know what I mean? Kids are kids, and they always want to move on to the next thing. Right. Or they, you know, in today's day and age, they're afraid to work hard for something. Mm-hmm. They rather play the video games. They rather watch TV. You know, they rather just sit around and eat snacks. Yeah. You know what I mean? And what parents don't really realize is you're setting your kid up for failure. Yeah. Because in this day and age, nobody finishes anything anymore. Right. Yeah. Right. And if you allow your kid to quit everything, or you know, leave everything when something gets hard. Yeah. What do you think they're going to be like when they're older? You know, when they have to go to college, when they have to get their first job, you know, and their boss is telling them, hey, you know, you're lazy, you know, and, you know, we have to fire you. You know, the whole world is going to like implode, you know, in their minds, like, oh my God, I just lost my job. You know, my life is over. No, like, you know, you have to prepare your kids for failure and not being lazy and not quitting things when they get hard. Right. You know, it's easier to deal with a crying kid now than deal with a broken adult later.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you 1,000%, you know, and I think it's interesting because people will say things like, oh, a mom will say, you know, you're going to do this for an entire year. By the way, they scare their kids to death. The kids are like 6 years old. You know, you're going to be committed for the next entire year. You know, you can't quit. Like, they don't even know what the word commitment means. And they're like throwing all this stuff. Now the kid could tell that the parents are concerned, so they're not willing to commit. Right. And then I found too that the parents will say, like, listen, the Joneses, we're not quitters. You know, we'll finish out the 6 months. I go, and then what are you going to do? Quit, right? Like, so you are a quitter because you're quitting, right? You don't understand. You could call it whatever you want. You could put icing on it however you want, and it's still going to be quitting. So I have to say, like, I've promoted, I went through this just recently, and went back in my head and I started writing down how many black belts I promoted. And then I forgot so many. So I enlisted the help of 2 of my black belts they remembered everything. 178 black belts we promoted in the course. That's not really a lot, though, if you think about 33 years, right? Yeah. I know people that promote 178 black belts a year, and you know, in their style, right? But for me, that was a lot, and not one of them made it to black belt without being pushed by their parents. Not one of those adults made it to black belt without having someone on their side pushing them through, whether it be me or another student or their relatives or their wives or husbands, right? So they needed that. And, you know, when the going gets tough, people quit nowadays. That's what they do. They just give up. You know, and by the way, think about it. We live in a fast food society. Everything is easy, right? You know, we want something, we could go boom and get it, right? So if we can't, we have to work hard. And our ego gets in the way and our mind gets in the way, and we want to work hard and we're going to quit because it's too difficult.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I was going to add something really quick. Sorry. I know we're down to like pretty much just a few minutes
I just
left,
looked at the time. I'm like, holy crud.
Yeah, time flew by. You know, but something that I did. And so I'm going to explain something a little bit about what I'm currently doing with my school. And then I want to pose a quick question to you. So basically what we're doing is I have I have my Shisenkan, curriculum through
Right.
my teacher Ron Sensei, right? But then I also offer like, my own curriculum as well, which is more of like your modern combatives and self-defense, right? And that's really like a hybrid system of like, Japanese jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, boxing, weapons. I think I left one or two things out of there. But anyway, that's like a very bare bones, short and sweet, right down to the point, simplistic,
Right.
approach to martial arts. Like
Yeah.
there's no complexities. Like these are the katas, and you have to understand the foundations, and the concepts here. It's just no, this is the movement you have to do, and you memorize this movement, make it
Yeah.
muscle memory, very clear cut. Because I found that I've actually been having a lot more success with that.
Great.
As far as the actual growth of my students in
Yeah.
the school.
Nice.
And I, not to say like it's better, I certainly don't think it's better, which is funny.
Right.
I prefer, like getting into detail in depth, like what Lewis and I, and obviously yourself, is used to, like learning,
Yeah.
get going in for the long game, not just the short and sweet and tell me exactly how I have to do it. But unfortunately, I feel like this is what modern society has turned into, that they can't appreciate anything complex, anything more than like, no attention span, nothing.
Oh
So
yeah, it's terrible.
yeah. And so my question for you then, Xian, is, for schools that teach NIMPO, or maybe let's say even like hybrid NIMPO systems, what would be your recommendation in, as far as in the US in today's world?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer this with two answers, because I know, Lewis, you had asked me about self-defense in the modern time, right? And I didn't get a chance to answer that. So for martial arts to be effective, you have to be able to apply it, and you have to pressure test it, right? And you have to be able to do it in multiple scenarios, right? So like you want to drill the techniques until people are almost at nauseum of doing the techniques, but you don't want to let it get to that point where they feel bored or frustrated, because that's all they're doing. So you have to do what we call disguising repetition, right?
Yeah.
So if you're doing a mote kote gyaku, a wrist lock, right, off of a punch, now you could do it off of a grab. The other day we did it like 20 different ways. Turn around, person grabs you on the shoulder, two hands, one single grab. They come up for a push and you parry, tap, parry like a knife parry and bring it into a wrist lock. And all these different scenarios to bring excitement into the movement. But they don't realize, as you're moving from move to move to move, it's still the same move presented in a different way, and they're going to get better at it. But the only way to get good is by repetition. And that's the problem sometimes. Even in my school, kids learn, they move on to the next belt, they forget everything they've learned before, they learn the next Q level, whatever it be, and then they get their belt, and then they forget it all and move on. And by the time they get to black belt, I'll ask them, sometimes I'll ask my black belt, young black belts, teach that kata to the beginner kata, like the first kata we learned, to those students. Oh, I don't remember it. And I'm like, and that's common. But, for me, just before I was sitting on the couch and I'm reading through all my Hanbo notes, like, I've been doing this forever, but like, I need to refresh it in my mind too, the names, the way it's done. And a lot of times that's basically all you have to do is continually practice. And then, of course, as far as self-defense applications, see, people don't realize what a real self-defense situation is. They see it in the movies, they hear about it, you could talk about it, but until someone is in their face, breathing down their neck, ready to kill them or beat them up, they're never going to know what it's like to fight under adrenaline stress, to know what it's like to have a bigger opponent who's not a willing participant or uke. And, you got to learn how to make the things work that need to be worked. I got really good by teaching around the world and doing like wrist lock pins, because like I would get people all different wrist sizes, body size, weight. Some people wanted to make me look silly because they wanted to prove that it didn't work. So I had to find a way to make them work on everybody. So I needed to learn how to make it work all the time. And that took massive practice. But I had a built-in training partner, which are all the seminars around the world, doing it with people that I was teaching. And that's how I got really good at it. And people, I've been known on YouTube before I just disconnected the comment section because I would get pissed off and annoyed by reading stupid comments from stupid people. Anyway, I would get people go, oh, that doesn't work. They're just doing that because he's asking them to. And meanwhile, my students would be like, oh no, like I know what that feels like when he puts that on me, like that kind of thing. So so self-defense is reality-based. But I fear that there's only a small portion of our student base that will ever be able to truly defend themselves, to conjure up that violence, to be able to do something strong enough and hard enough to be able to really hurt the other person. Because in general, the people who train in our school are good people. It's the bad people that they're defending against that don't care whether they kill you, hurt you, stab you or whatever. We're always as good people thinking like, what if I hurt the person? I don't want to hurt the person. What if I'll go to jail? I'll go to this, but those bad people don't think that way. So we have to learn how to conjure up that violence and be able to become the storm, so to speak.
Yeah.
Man,
wow, that's great.
You're preaching to the choir. Like I'm doing my first in-school tournament this Saturday.
I saw that.
And you're one of the main reasons why I'm doing it, because you do it as well. And you do the outside tournaments as well. Yeah. But I had only a handful of adults enrolled. And the adults, 90% of them want self-defense. Right. But only a handful registered for the tournament. And I'm just like, how you want self-defense? You truly want to learn self-defense, but you don't want to test it against an uncompliant person? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, you know what it is though? Here's a marketing tip for you. We have to break down the barrier, because it's not that they don't want to do the tournament. They would, except there's a fear element. Like adults are the worst when it comes to fear, right? Kids, they're, you tell them to jump off of a roof and they'll do it, right? They're kids. They don't really have that reasoning response, right? But adults will work it out like, I'm not sure if I'm going to look stupid, or if I'm going to get hurt, or if I'm going to be able to perform like I think I can, or anything like that. So that's what stops them from being a part of a lot of the things that we do. And I once had years ago, and I guarantee you if I did it now, I wouldn't get anybody to do it. But I once had a night called the Shugyo night, right? And I had in fact, the guy who keeps commenting is my student for like 25 years. And he knows my old school mindset, and he's watched me through the years. But we did a Shugyo night, which was literally 12 hours of nonstop training, started at 9 o'clock, went through the night all the way into the next morning, no sleep, no rest. And my ultimate goal was to get everyone to quit. We did thousands of push-ups and sit-ups, and then we did tempering techniques, smashing our forearms and all these crazy things. Like I had one of my main students once said to me after years, he said, I was praying that I would break a bone or injure myself, because he wasn't going to quit. And he actually made it to the very end. But he goes, I was praying that something would happen so I could stop doing this and I'd have a legitimate excuse. Greg wrote, I remember that. It was brutal. Yes. But anyway, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to be able to push yourself. So that's why adults don't do the Shiai. They think that it's for kids. That's their excuse. It's for the younger ones, right? Because they're not used to testing themselves in uncomfortable positions, right? Coming to the dojo at first is like my wife, and I know we're running out of time. My wife, she told me when she started training, she no longer trains, but she trained up to like yellow belt and hurt herself. But she said the first class, now this is my wife, I'm going to take care of her. I'm going to make sure she's okay, everything. She said it was the most intimidating thing she's ever done in her entire life was to enter into that dojo and do the class. Now, I don't know how it could be, because I'm there to like guide her and take care of her. But this is how people feel about the martial arts. That's why the adults are different. I think BJJ is a little different because they're on the ground. They're not going to fall. Yeah. They get to roll around a lot more.
They have a big safety net. There's a lot of injuries, but they have a big safety net.
Exactly. But and they're, it's more of a camaraderie kind of thing too. Yeah. And that's where they got an edge over like a Nimpo and Ninjutsu, because we're throwing people and we're pinning them. There's a lot of pain points and so on. But however, though, I do believe that a lot of the adults feel like maybe, this isn't for me. But really, that's just an excuse, because I forced some of them to do it. And they thanked me for that afterwards. Like, oh, I'm really glad I did. That was really fun. I loved it. I learned a lot. And that's The hard part about teaching is we got to push them to the point where we almost push them away, right? You push, and some of them quit. You know, you're pushing me too far, or others will say, "Oh my God, thanks for pushing me. This is amazing."
Wow.
That is amazing advice. A lot of those are things that, like, you know, like normally I would not have thought some of those were good ideas, you know, especially as far as like pushing, you know, and like, you know, obviously like there's always some gray area with, you know, how much you can push someone, but that's great to hear because obviously, you know, you're so much more successful. You said you've had like, you know, 1,600 students. I mean, God, that's a lot, you know. So, you know, for anyone else that's watching this, if you're training in the US and in Nimpo or, you know, a similar system, you know, I think this is you're going to listen to someone, you know, Ali Shihan is a person to listen to.
Thank you. I appreciate that, you guys. I sometimes feel like I'm just like the average guy. I know I've done a lot and I've been a lot and you know, accomplished a lot, but I look at it and I go to myself, like, really, like, sometimes I feel like that movie in Rocky when he tells that one. You remember when they're walking with the girl and he's giving her this speech about smoking and like, and he's like the main Rocky thing. And he's like
the first Rocky, right?
Yeah, first Rocky one.
Yeah.
And he's like he's done giving her this big moral lesson, and she goes into the house, closes the door, and then she opens it up, and she's like, "Hey, Rocky." And he turns around and he thinks she's going to say, "Thank you. This is the greatest lesson I ever learned." And she goes, "Screw you, you idiot." And she slams the door. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, screw me." Like, why would people listen to me? Like, and sometimes I feel like that. Like, why would they listen? Like, I could give a parent a lecture on how to parent better. Even though I am a parent and I did a good job, I have a 25-year-old successful kid. However, they're probably thinking like, why should I listen to him? Like, you know, that's where that reverence comes back in, right? Where you got to be like, I really respect this guy. I'm going to take his advice.
Yeah. Man, you're just dropping mics all night tonight. That's great, man.
I appreciate that.
This podcast, this episode has probably been one of our best ones. And like there was questions we didn't even get to, so we're definitely gonna.
If you want to do another one, I'd be more than happy to.
Oh, absolutely,
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Thank you so much, Omar. You have any last words for?
No, I think that's great that you're doing a podcast and trying to share the message. I think that's awesome, and it's just great to chat with you guys. And thanks for thinking of me. I appreciate it. You know, I feel honored. So thank you.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right, you guys.
All right. Till next time. See you guys later. Sayonara.
Take care. Sayonara.
Good night.